Hi there. I've decided to paint 3 paintings for you using my line and big brush watercolour technique, hopefully explaining how I do it and hopefully getting you to join in. My first painting that I'm going to do is in Boscastle, and this is walking up the riverside towards the bay. I use a very simple process and very simple equipment. I use my bamboo ink pen, which is basically a piece of bamboo with a matchstick stuck in the end and some Indian ink. I use very simple brushes really, a big mop brush, sort of an inch hake, and then I've got 2 detailing brushes, one sort of long hair but smaller. The paints I use are all Windsor and Newton. I'll list the colours in the description below. My process is quite simple. It's a 4-stage process. I usually draw in a line for the horizon and then draw in the main elements using the ink work. Sometimes I use pencil, and in this video you'll see me use the pencil technique first of all, then I go over it with ink. And then finally we put the watercolour in, starting with the sky, working down, putting an initial wash on the painting, and then adding another wash through for the buildings, and finally putting in the sort of the darker areas and the detailing of the people in the case of this painting. The videos that I've done are sped up a little bit, so they're painting at twice the speed that I normally do. I've done that to reduce the amount of time that you have to watch it. But there you go. Anyway, come on, let's go and paint. You're very welcome for the next 20 minutes. I'm going to demonstrate a painting I've done of Boscastle, working from my initial sketch. The sketch is created in pen and ink, and I've coloured it using grayscale felt tip pens. The darkest areas towards the back are where I want to focus the eye, and there's an area on the right hand side with people in it that I want to try and keep quite light towards the end of the painting, but I'll explain more of that when we actually get onto the painting. So as you can see, I am just drawing in the shapes now, trying to get them correct, moving through the various stages of transferring the sketch. There's really not much you can talk about when you're talking about transferring your pencil lines. I guess some top tips are to get some of your lines straight at this point, because when you go in with the ink, you don't want to look back and see wonky lines. So I'm always checking, funnily enough, against the masking tape, just to make sure those lines are as straight as they can be going up, and making sure the houses don't look wonky. You don't want a wonky house. Although sometimes that can be quite nice. Just adding in the window details now. At this point it's just, again, shapes, a square here and a line there. Nothing too complicated. Putting in the tree. And finally putting in some of the background lines. And again, I think I made a mistake here. So these lines are not exactly the same as the sketch. But it's my painting, so I don't really mind. And that's the drawing stage almost finished. Just need to put the people in. Talking about people, always had trouble putting people in. Always got the shapes and the sizes wrong. But basically, if you put a sort of a round circle on your horizon line and then kind of draw down, and then draw down further than where you should be, if you think it is, it makes a better shape. And that's how I got over that problem, really. Onto the inking now, using my bamboo pen, which is just a piece of bamboo with a matchstick stuck in the end. I start on the left and work my way across the painting to the right. As I'm right-handed, it stops me from smudging the ink work, although I have been known to forget that and start in the middle and then have to smudge my ink work anyway. So it's just a top tip, really. I'm just working my way across the painting, following some of my pencil lines, but letting the pen do the work for me, making some sort of marks on the paper, sometimes little short bursts of sketching rather than a continuous line, makes it a bit more interesting to look at for the viewer. Also adjusting some of the lines, so some which are straight will now be wonky. Again, just add a little bit of interest. And at this point, I'm adding a little bit more detail into the windows, making them sort of more windowy, with the lines and stuff like that. Just doing the last little shed on the end here. Probably my favourite bit of the painting, actually, the little shed on the end. There's also a tree that I've just drawn in. Just some basic lines to indicate the shape of the tree rather than an actual tree, and just working my way back across the bank. Not really much you can say to add to this part of the video. You saw me draw it in pencil. Basically, I'm drawing it with ink now, and that's the way these things really go. What else can you say? I'm not sure. Putting the grassy bank in there, and then this is where I start to make my lines a little bit more accurate. This is the key part of the picture for me. The houses on the right hand side of the painting, and the figures. So I'm really just trying to make these shapes a bit more accurate, putting in the guttering and the bits along the top, tiles along the top of the roof. Just to add, when I come to the painting, the detail will be on the right hand side of the painting, and help to focus the viewer in onto the bits that I want you to look at, which again is the people on the right hand side. So there'll be quite a lot of lighter tone in this part of the painting, to sort of help get the viewer to look where I want them to look. Drawing in the rocks now, making a bit more effort with these as well, putting some shadow onto the bits that sort of describe where the darkest part of the rock is. Rocks always obviously have irregular shapes, so I try to put the irregular shapes in, making them bigger at the front and then working smaller to give you some perspective. Perspective is not always about getting the lines looking to the right way, it's also about making the shapes the right size. And then bringing in the grassy bank on the right hand side, again with a very sort of sketchy line, more rocks now going in, with their sort of indication of their sort of 3D-ness, if that's the word. And then finally the figures themselves, where I will put a little bit more work in there now, putting backpacks and clothes on the figures. But generally only giving the figures one leg, which always seems a bit odd, but when you paint it in, it makes a lot of sense. So there we go. No line to the bottom of the house on the right, just to remind me not to paint too far down. And then finally just putting in the hills in the background, and that's the inking done, really. Very simple. So onto the good bit now, the painting. And I'm going to start with some Colbolt blue, which, as you can see, I just put a great big splash of paint in at the top of the painting. And then using a fairly wet brush, just bringing that blue down into the rest of the painting. Adding some quinacridone gold now to the hills, which probably have a bit of that blue paint in it. At this point, I'm not trying to be accurate with my brush. And again, you can see I'm holding it at the very end rather than the tip. So I haven't got much control over the brush. I'm not too worried if it goes over some of the ink drawing, because it's a very light stage of the painting, so any other colours I put over this will hide any mistakes, and letting the blue sort of mingle in with the yellow, as you can see there, just getting those distant hills looking distanty and green, which is how they should be. And moving on to the main sort of area of the painting that I want people to look at, and just making some very sort of flicky movements with the brush, adding different colours into this what is going to be a light area of the painting to help drag the eye into the painting and stop it rolling off the edge, by putting a nice blue line down the side there. The grass going in as well, just a very light tone, again with some flicks just to in the foreground there, just to sort of bring your eye to rest on the lighter colours. The blue, again, adding more interest to make you move into the picture. The left-hand side of the painting, again, I'll deal very simply at this point with this big brush. I love using this big brush because it just fills in the areas very quickly and gets rid of that white paper, which can be very sort of distracting when you first start painting. Putting in the bank now with sort of a bluey purpley wash, and then bringing in a slightly I'll say a slightly warmer bluey colour right in the foreground there, again just to stop the eye drifting out of the paper, and also just add a bit more interest by adding another colour into that bank. The swipes of blue going in now are the river. It wasn't covering all the rocks, as I remember. The tide was out, so there wasn't much water there. So I just want to give a quick indication of that, which has left a sort of a bluey look to the sort of river, which is what I wanted. Now the end bank here has to be quite dark because it's in the darkest sort of reflected areas of the painting. So I'm putting in that. It looks really dark at the moment, and don't worry about that. When it dries, it'll be lighter. But also, this is part of the darkest bit of the painting anyway, so I'm starting to get some contrast in the watercolour. Again, adding just a little bit more paint there. You can add paint when it's wet without cauliflowering. Putting some green now on the left-hand bank. First colour. These colours are still wet, remember, so they will be mingling and merging. And I'm picking up any extra paint with the brush. It's had a drying period now, so after the drying period I'm now going to start adding in these buildings on the left, and I'm going to deal with these quite simply, merging the colours from one house to the next house. The sort of purpley blue colour on the roof is sort of represents slate. Just mingling the colours on the page, and always test your colour. So I tested the colour there, I'm happy with it, but I'm not worrying about it touching against that purpley colour. It will mingle, it will pull down into the paint, but that's fine. We can go over that with some darks later to hide it, but also it just sort of had some harmony to the painting, which I kind of like. And as you can see there, that whole bit has been painted with one wash, really, essentially just pulling all the colours from one side of the painting to the other, making note of the light and the darks within the tonal sketch that I did earlier. Adding some quite wet paint at this point. Again, not worried too much. I did have this white house on the left. I didn't know whether to put it in or not, so I have put the white house in as a white house. Sometimes I put them in a little bit bluier. Working on the right hand side of the painting now, I'm adding slightly darker paint, slightly more in shadow. So these are darker colours now, darker tones. Apart from the roof, which I've left fairly light because I wanted to keep this area so that you can see the figures in the end. But I basically used the same colour for the roof as for the shadow of the eaves of the roof on the left, on the right there. I added the windows in, and then I kind of painted over them. That's the kind of the way I work, I have to say. And you'll see again the paint is mingling with the red of the building next to it. So yeah, just making the flow of the paint, not worrying too much about it going over the edges. And I think you have to be careful with pen and wash that you don't end up sort of with a colouring book. You sort of kind of fill it in. You should kind of think about the feel of the mood you're trying to create. And again, this painting looks very light at this stage. This stage always used to scare me, if I'm honest, because you know you've got to bang in some darks to bring the thing alive, but you want to put them in now, but it's best to wait, let the painting dry and settle. I will put some dark rocks in though, working again with big shapes going to small shapes to help with the perspective, flicking that paint into what is still a wet wash from the well, it's just a wet wash where I've added the damp brush there, just letting the water flow straight down to help give a sort of indication of reflection into that wet rock. And reflection's not only water, it is the wet rocks that you're trying to make there. Adding a little bit of tone underneath the grassy bank there, because it was a sunny day, so that's there. And again, using the same technique, a damp brush just to pull that colour down into the rock so it's not got a hard edge. and you can also pull the colour up as I'm doing there, which is sometimes quite nice with water, just to get your reflection moving, and tipping the board as well to make sure that paint really moves in the direction I want it to. So yeah, we're moving on to the rocks on the right hand side of the painting, just putting in the dark areas and using that same wash to put the dark areas of the rocks in the riverbed. Almost finished this stage of the painting now, the second visit to the paper. Not bums in this section, I feel. Just adding in some more water to those damp bits of paint just to spread the paint out, and that really is this stage finished. Let's let it dry. So this is the last visit to the paper now. As you can see, it's nice and dry, and it's time to put in some really dark shapes now, using my big mop brush, a nice dark purpley colour to start off with down the side of this building, just to add the shadow. And this paint is fairly milky in consistency now. It's not watery. It's going to stay on the page, and I'm just going to merge it with the next couple of colours, the reds and blues mixing together, warms and cool colours mixing together, as I start to put in these big shadows, which will move across the paper and hopefully help to drag the eye to the focal point, which again is the building at the end, the red building next to the blue building, which is not an easy thing to say, red building, blue building. Adding roofs in, again, just letting the colours merge with the side that I've added that's dark there. Adding in the eaves again of the next building, and sometimes filling in the windows as I go, dragging the brush down just to give an indication that there's something there. But again, this is not the important part of the painting, so I'm not trying to put too much detail in here, just adding colour really to show that these buildings are sort of 3D in shape. Now this is the centre of interest, the start of the centre of interest, and I'm putting in a dark sort of burnt umber type colour there, adding in the blue again on the building just to add some more definition to it, leaving little spots as well to represent brickwork that might be in the light. These buildings often have that sort of brickwork that's not even and shows up against the light reflecting on it. The far bank I've just put in as a sort of a mark really to show that there's something there, and there's reflection of the grass on the bank there, and the rocks going in quickly now. Just adding some more sort of tone to give them a bit more shape. This part of the painting is really about adding darks, as I say, to contrast your lights against your darks, and I'm doing that with the green now against the hedges that run along the bank, adding in some tree there, which I regret, to be quite honest with you, but it's in there now, and I think it looks okay actually on the finished painting. Dropping some green into the blue on the building, just to sort of help. A bit more grass there, and those buildings are casting shadow across that grass, so I'm putting some dark green along the edges there. Not much to say really. The rocks again sort of indicate the form of the grass there with their sort of shadow, and adding in another sort of shape just to draw your eye into the people, sort of an arrow shape really, just saying look, the people are over there. Just a trick I use to get people to look where I want them to look. And I think the painting is now really starting to come together, which is nice in this final stage. And the people now, so some sort of flesh coloured heads that I put on there, or it could be hair colour, depends which way they're walking. Straight in with some colour for their t-shirts and trousers, and these colours will all merge down the painting. I'm not too fussed about that. I just want to sort of get some nice shapes really, and they're not people, they're just shapes to me. Adding in the arms and legs on the front character, a red backpack, and then adding the t-shirt next, after the head obviously. So yeah, working down the t-shirt now with an orange against the reflection of the backpack, and some blue trousers, which again will just all merge together. There won't be a sort of a line in this. The shadow here I'm going to put against the rocks so that I can help bring those rocks out. And again, those shadows are sort of suggesting the lie of the land as well, which all helps with the painting. And it's almost complete now, apart from this bank along the right, which I still think is a little bit too light, so I'm going to put some more colour along the rocks there to add a bit more form, and then bring that colour straight down the bank there for reflection of the grass hanging down, flicking up and down, leaving bits just to make it a bit more interesting for the viewer to look at, and getting lighter towards the focal point. Again, another sort of indication, a way to get people to look into the painting at the bit that I want you to look at, which again is the people moving along the river. There was a lot more people, as I remember, but I just put a few in. So that's it. That's the painting. Hope you enjoyed it, and come back soon.